When you think of the Cold War, you probably picture spies and nukes, shadowy figures trading secrets in dimly lit alleys, and world leaders with their fingers hovering over the big red button. It's a story of high-stakes geopolitics. But what about the wild survival tech built by regular people? Down in the basements and garages of suburbia, a different kind of arms race was happening. This wasn't about missiles. It was about ingenuity, about protecting your family with whatever you could find. These are the forgotten, sometimes illegal inventions that help civilians prepare for the unthinkable, a testament to human creativity under the ultimate pressure. I've always been fascinated by the things people build when their backs are against the wall. It's one thing to have a government-issued survival manual, but it's another thing entirely to MacGyver a fallout shelter from stuff you bought at the hardware store. We're talking about homemade radiation meters, improvised gas masks, and survival stoves that could burn just about anything. These weren't just quirky projects. For many, they were a serious attempt to reclaim a sense of control in a world that felt like it was spinning out of it. And the authorities, they weren't always fans, often banning these creations for being too dangerous or for causing public panic. Here's the part that really gets me excited. Shockingly, some of these gadgets still work, and a few are even legal if you know where to look. The principles behind them are timeless, and the resourcefulness is something we can all learn from. So today, we're going to dig into the blueprints of these forbidden Cold War survival hacks. We're going to explore the science, the stories, and the surprising legacy of these incredible civilian inventions. Some of this stuff is so clever, it'll make you rethink what's possible with a little bit of grit and a whole lot of duct tape. Let's get building. Alright, let's start with the big one, radiation. The official advice was duck and cover, but many families felt that wasn't nearly enough. So they took matters into their own hands and turned their basements into makeshift fortresses. This is the basement fallout shield. The idea was simple. Put as much dense material as possible between you and the radioactive fallout. People got incredibly creative. I've seen plans for lining walls with lead sheeting, which was expensive but effective. A more common approach was to stack concrete blocks or even build entire bookcases and fill them with dirt, sand, or stacks of old books, anything to add mass. The real genius came from the use of everyday objects. People would take large steel drums or storage bins, fill them with earth, and arrange them around their designated shelter space. It was a brilliant application of basic physics. While local ordinances sometimes banned these modifications for violating building codes or being structurally unsound, the core principle was solid. In fact, these improvised shields could significantly reduce radiation exposure. It's no surprise that modern preppers still use these exact same techniques, stacking sandbags or water containers in their basements. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective. After surviving the initial blast, you'd need heat and a way to cook. But what if the gas lines were cut and firewood was scarce or contaminated? Enter the survival stove, a marvel of improvised engineering. Often built from old coffee cans, paint cans, or metal ducting, these were early versions of what we now call rocket stoves. The design is beautiful in its simplicity, an L-shaped combustion chamber that creates an incredibly efficient, hot-burning fire. This efficiency meant you could use almost anything as fuel. Twigs, dried leaves, scraps of paper, junk mail, it all burned. This versatility, however, was also its biggest problem. People would get desperate and start burning things they absolutely shouldn't, like plastics, treated wood, or rubber, releasing toxic fumes into their enclosed shelter space. You can imagine why fire departments and city officials were not fans. These stoves were frequently banned due to the extreme fire risk and the danger of carbon monoxide poisoning in poorly ventilated spaces. But the design itself was too good to disappear. The core principles inspired the modern, commercially available rocket stoves that campers and off-gridders love today for their incredible fuel efficiency and minimal smoke. So, you've survived the blast and you're hunkered down in your basement fortress. How do you know when it's safe to come out? You need a radiation detector. Military-grade Geiger counters were expensive and unavailable to the public. The solution? The Kearney Fallout Meter, or KFM. This is one of my all-time favorite builds. It's a non-electric dosimeter you could make from plans published by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. All you needed was a coffee can, some aluminum foil, a glass jar, and some thread. It's a simple electrostatic meter that measures gamma radiation exposure. You'd charge the aluminum foil leaves inside the jar, and as radiation passed through, it would ionize the air, causing the charge to leak away and the leaves to fall. By measuring how quickly they fell, you could estimate the radiation dose. It was brilliant, but it had a controversial history. Some local governments tried to ban the distribution of the plans, fearing that these homemade devices would either give a false sense of security or, conversely, create mass panic if they actually worked. Despite the controversy, the KFM was surprisingly accurate and reliable. The plans are still public domain, and you can legally build one today. It's a perfect project for anyone who loves hands-on science. Long-term survival isn't just about weathering the first few days. It's about, well, sustaining yourself for weeks or even months. That means preserving food without a refrigerator or freezer. The Cold War preppers' answer was the underground food safe. Honestly, this is a concept that's as old as farming itself, but it was adapted for the atomic age. The most common method was what you'd call a glorified root cellar. Families would dig deep pits in their backyards, line them, and create a space where the natural, stable temperature of the earth, usually around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, could keep root vegetables, canned goods, and other supplies from spoiling. A more controversial variant involved burying large, clean oil drums or metal trash cans horizontally. You'd load them up with supplies, seal them tight, and bury them. This kept the food safe from the elements, pests, and even radiation. However, in suburban and urban areas, this was a huge problem. Digging massive holes in your yard often violated zoning laws and could interfere with underground utility lines. There were also concerns about soil contamination if the containers weren't sealed properly. But for those living off-grid, this method never really went away. It's a low-tech, no-power refrigerator that works just as well today as it did 70 years ago. In any survival scenario, clean water is everything. During the Cold War, people stockpiled water purification tablets, but not all tablets were created equal. The ones available on the black market or through back channels were often far more potent than what you can buy over the counter today. We're talking about high-concentration iodine tablets and, more rarely, silver salt compounds. These things were brutally effective. They could kill a wider range of pathogens, viruses, bacteria, protozoa, in murkier water and in colder temperatures than many modern solutions. They were the sledgehammer of water purification. The problem was, they were a sledgehammer to your body too. The high iodine content could be dangerous, especially for people with thyroid conditions or if used for an extended period. The silver salts carried a risk of a condition called argyria, which permanently turns your skin a bluish-gray color. For these health reasons, the sale of these high-potency formulas was heavily restricted and eventually banned for public use. While they were undeniably effective in a short-term, life-or-death situation, the long-term risks were just too high. It's a fascinating example of the trade-offs people were willing to make when faced with an existential threat. If you had to venture outside into a contaminated world, you'd need to protect your lungs. Official NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical, masks were not available to civilians, so once again, they improvised. One of the most common and ingenious designs was the homemade vacuum cleaner mask. The logic was surprisingly sound. You'd take the flexible hose from a canister vacuum, attach it to a simple face mask, and run the other end to a filtration unit you built yourself. This unit was often a paint can or a large coffee can, stuffed with materials designed to filter the air. The key was the filter medium. People used activated charcoal from fish tank filters to absorb chemical agents, and then layered in dense materials like furnace filters, felt, or even tightly packed cotton balls to trap radioactive dust and biological particles. While these masks wouldn't be as effective as a military-grade respirator with a perfect seal, they were far better than nothing against particulate threats like fallout. Of course, authorities outlawed many of these contraptions. A poorly made mask could be deadly, giving a false sense of security or restricting breathing. Still, the underlying principle of multi-stage air filtration is solid science, and the sheer resourcefulness is just incredible to me. So you've got your shelter, your stove, your water, and your mask. What about everything else? This is where the civil defense survival tin comes in. Think of it as the grandfather of the modern Altoids tin survival kit, but on a much more serious scale. People would pack tobacco tins or small metal boxes with the essentials for survival. Some of the contents were perfectly legal and sensible. Fishing line and hooks, a small compass, waterproof matches, bandages, and water purification bags. These were the basics you'd need to get by. But these tins often had a secret, darker side. They became a place to stash contraband items acquired on the black market. We're talking about things like morphine syrettes for extreme pain, or even amphetamines, pep pills, to stay awake and alert for days on end. These items were strictly controlled and highly illegal for a civilian to possess. But in the context of surviving a nuclear war, the rules went out the window. This mystery box approach highlights the desperation of the era. Today, the concept of a personal survival tin is more popular than ever, but thankfully, the modern versions have swapped the illegal narcotics for things like mini multi-tools and emergency whistles. Looking back at these incredible and sometimes dangerous inventions, it's clear that the Cold War wasn't just fought by governments. It was a psychological battle fought in every home. These weren't military-issue gadgets. They were the inventions of everyday people, proving that with a little knowledge and a lot of improvisation, survival is always possible. The basement fallout shield, the coffee can stove, the homemade radiation meter, they are all monuments to human resilience. They represent a fundamental refusal to just give up and accept the worst. It's the spirit of the builder, the tinkerer, the problem solver, saying, if the world is going to end, I'm at least going to have a say in how my story finishes. That spirit is something that deeply resonates with me. It's the idea that you can understand the world around you well enough to take it apart and rebuild it to serve your needs, especially when it matters most. These Cold War hackers weren't just building things, they were building hope. They were taking the terrifying abstract concept of nuclear annihilation and turning it into a series of tangible problems that could be solved with tools, materials, and cleverness. It's a powerful lesson that is just as relevant today as it was 70 years ago. Don't be a passive consumer of your circumstances. Be an active participant. The ingenuity on display here is truly inspiring, and it makes you wonder what else is out there, hidden in old manuals and forgotten blueprints. The desire to survive and protect the ones we love is a universal driver of innovation. Which of these Cold War survival hacks would you try? Or maybe you have a family story about a relative who built one of these? Let us know in the comments. I read all of them, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching.